watching the News Hour at 9.
Welcome back. After seeing a new normal for all of 2020 where our children couldn't play out in the open, playgrounds and parks were a big no-no, and it was a vacation for most part of the year. India moved into another new normal this year. Online classes restricted playtime in open spaces and outings with masks. Now we're inching closer to a sense of full freedom, perhaps with vaccination for children for COVID-19 coming soon. The subject expert committee of the central government has given its approval to Bharat Biotech's Covaxin for children aged 2 to 18. We're awaiting a final nod from the top drug regulatory body, but that's just a mere formality. The breakthrough has raised hopes for parents who fear the future and health of their kids being jeopardized. Let's listen in.
It's a very good news. बच्चों की वैक्सीन आ गई हैं. As a parents हम लोग बहुत खुश हैं.
ड्राइव भी होपफुली 2-3 महीने में चालू हो जाएगा. बच्चों के स्कूल भी खुल गए हैं. एक बार ये ड्राइव चालू हो जाए, बच्चे वैक्सीनेट हो जाए तो पेरेंट्स भी थोड़ा प्रोटेक्टिव फील करेंगे बच्चों को लेकर. इट्स गुड न्यूज़.
अब शायद हम बच्चे भी फाइनली स्कूल जा पाएंगे, जिसके बाद हमारा जो एजुकेशनल पैटर्न है वो इम्प्रूव हो. 2 साल से हम लोग ऑनलाइन स्क्रीन पर पढ़ रहे थे, जिसकी वजह से हमारे एजुकेशन पर बहुत ज़्यादा इफेक्ट पड़ा था. हमारे मेंटल और फिजिकल हम लोगों को बहुत ज़्यादा स्ट्रेस मिला था.
हम पेरेंट्स के लिए भी ये एक बहुत ज़्यादा रिलीफ होगा कि हम ये सोचें कि हमारे बच्चे अगर वैक्सीनेटेड हो जाते हैं तो शायद इस पेंडेमिक की चेन को हम रोक पाएं, शायद वो सेफ हो पाएं, शायद हम फिर एक नॉर्मल लाइफ पर वापस आ पाएं और शायद बच्चे फिर से स्कूल जा पाएं, जो कि एक और विषय है चिंता का.
You're watching the News Hour at 9. Debate number 2 on Times Now. Super Prime Time.
And for more on this, let's go across to our guest. Joining us is Dr. Naresh Trehan, Chairman and Managing Director of Medanta. Also with us are Dr. Vipul Shah of the R.P. Shah Memorial Trust, and he's also the parent of a vaccinated child. Dr. Sameer Dalwai, National Joint Secretary of the Indian Academy of Pediatrics, is also with us. Thank you so much, doctors, for joining us this evening. Let me begin with Dr. Naresh Trehan. Dr. Trehan, we've seen the SEC permissions come in. How soon do you think it is before the vaccine for children is a reality out there?
Well, first of all, it's a very welcome news today that it has been approved by the expert committee, which is a very significant move because the data has been analyzed by them, collated, and on the basis of the data, they have approved the or made the recommendation to the DCGI, who is the final authority to approve it. So the process has started. Now, unless there is something which is amiss here, the mission from the DCGI should be coming in the next week or two, or maybe even less than that. And then the manufacturing process can start. So the company is waiting, to hear the final nod before it can start the process of actually putting it out in the market. So it will take, I think, about 4 to 6 weeks for it to be really available in the marketplace. But the basic thing is that this is a much awaited relief. Because we've been always worrying about by healthcare providers that if the third wave comes and it affects children worse than it had in the last wave or the wave before that, then it will be a problem because the children, first of all, 2 things. The children may suffer badly, or the second thing is that outside the metros, outside the tier 1 cities, the facilities for management of children is quite sparse.
Right.
Although the government is making great speed, the facilities or building the infrastructure to take care of the children, if God forbid that happens. But now there is a whole new dimension to it. This is designed in India, manufactured in India, and will be available. So that there is a proud moment for us that our biotechnology industry has reached a stage where not only were they able to produce for the adults, but now they are first of the block for children also.
Right. Before I go across to other doctors, if I can just ask you, Dr. Trehan, we have seen, for instance, when the adults were being vaccinated as well, there were priority groups. There were healthcare workers, there were frontline workers. There were different priority groups that were, in fact, given the vaccine first, and then age-wise, it was slowly the circle and the ambit was increased. Do you think there's a similar process that should be put in place while vaccinating children, for instance, those children with comorbidities, for instance, who perhaps need the vaccine more than others?
So it is a tracking system which is very, very important to follow because of the fact that the supply will not be adequate to vaccinate everybody very rapidly. So depending on the manufacturing ability of the company, Bharat Biotech, to be able to give enough doses, we may have to prioritize. And the priority list should be the same as has been for the adults. That the most vulnerable should be vaccinated first and then downstream. So I think it's a matter of time now, which is one the hope has arisen that things will move quite fast. And if we get, we have 43 crore children from 2 to 18, and so it's a large number. It's not a small number. Now the key lies in what the manufacturing capacity of the company is, and how fast these vaccines can be put out. Right. They have been building capacity, and I'm hopeful that within the next month or 6 weeks, we should start getting supplies in good numbers.
Okay, let me bring in Dr. Samir Dalwai. Dr. Dalwai, one very important aspect is that, when it comes to children, do you think that parents, need to take any extra safeguards vis-a-vis adults? And, how soon is it? It's a large number. As Dr. Trehan mentioned, it's 43 crore children. And therefore, if you look at 2 vaccines, we're looking at 86 crore vaccines being administered. Given that we are just short of about 100 crore vaccines, of course, our manufacturing capabilities have gone up. But how long a time frame are we looking at? Perhaps the next 6 to 8 months?
Yeah, so good evening, and first and foremost, I'm very happy on behalf of the Indian Academy of Pediatrics that there is good news around the corner. Let us be aware about the fact that yet the commercial use of this has to be rolled out, and we need to ramp up the amount and the number of vaccines available to be given as doses. Coming to your first point, which you mentioned about parents, I don't think there is anything extra precautions that parents have to take. We must remember that parents and children are actually much more used to vaccines and being vaccinated than adults are. So I'm sure children will hit the ground running, so to speak. The bigger issue is about getting enough number of doses, and Dr. Trehan sir mentioned about the huge numbers. So that's actually a production and a capacity building issue, and how many doses to send for the adults, how many for children. But I'm sure parents will give a sigh of relief that there's something around the corner for them. And I'm sure the Indian Academy of Pediatrics is very happy to cooperate with the government of India in offering our services of 33,000 pediatricians across the country, our own pediatric clinic. It remains to be seen whether the vaccinations will only be in the government ambit or they'll open it for a public-private partnership as well.
That's an important point. That's an important point. Let me bring in Dr. Trehan. Before I bring in Dr. Vipul Shah, Dr. Trehan, will this be, and how do you see this actually playing out in coming days? Will this be something that is administered through the government circles or the government distribution mechanisms only? Do you think that this will be open for the private? Will we see a combination of the two like exists for adult vaccines? And also the question that comes in also is that whether these vaccines will be paid for by the government, or will there be a private channel also? How do you expect things to pan out?
So I expect it will be similar to the previous methodology that we used, is to say that people can afford to get it done through private service. Because it will depend on the price of the vaccine that is put out, and the fact that the people who can afford it should get it from the private sources, because the burden on the government services will be reduced. And the government, of course, has the capacity to actually absorb the whole cost of at whatever cost they are getting and be able to administer it. So the point is, it's a huge task. We can do it in a combined manner, and we today have the capacity to administer as much or even more than 1 crore a day very easily. So if we have that capacity and the availability of vaccine actually comes out that it's adequate, maybe 10, 12 crores a month, then it's a task. When you see children having gotten 1 dose at least, that you know that 40-50% will get immunity from that. And there is also at the same time natural immunity developing either from children who got it already or from the ones who have had exposure and developed antibodies. So put together, we may achieve or approach herd immunity in a very short time, maybe by the end of the year. That's the key to the whole problem that we are facing today.
Well, absolutely. In fact, let me bring in very quickly Dr. Vipul Shah. Please stay with us, Dr. Trehan. Dr. Vipul Shah, as a parent of a vaccinated child, can you share with us very briefly your experience, not just, of course, in terms of the actual vaccine itself, but how this drastically changes things psychologically? Because neither is the child, no more the parent worried about, or at least the risk of COVID coming down if you go out in public comes down so much more drastically post-vaccination.
Thank you for the question. You know, I need to tell you that my wife is a gynecologist and she has to see 100 patients every day. And for one full year, you know, before we were vaccinated, both of us and my parents were vaccinated, she stayed in a different room altogether away from the kids, just to, you know, ensure that the kids don't get infected, my parents don't get infected. So it's been a huge toll on healthcare providers, you know, generally and personally for my family as well. Post the kids getting vaccinated, they were able to go out and meet their maternal grandmother for the first time. We checked their antibodies, and once the antibodies were there in huge number, we decided they could probably, you know, meet their grandmother who was vaccinated as well. So it's definitely, you know, a big relief for parents to know that the kids are protected.
Well, absolutely. That really, at the end of the day, is the biggest issue, isn't it, Dr. Trehan? We've seen huge psychological toll for parents, for children, and of course, as a live case sitting with us, in the case of those who are healthcare providers, you know, doctors, for instance, or other persons in the healthcare industry, it has been particularly challenging. Hopefully, with this news coming in, all of those issues perhaps we could look at settling down in the next 6 months to 8 months, perhaps, depending on how soon we can roll it out.
So, as you know, we have repeatedly expressed our concern about the safety of the children because of the lack of vaccine. And the whole question mark of whether schools should be open, not open. They have been opened cautiously, starting with the older age group. The younger children are more vulnerable because for them to actually observe the COVID-appropriate behavior is a little more difficult because they get excited with seeing each other and shed the masks. So, to neutralize that whole concern that we have had about the children's safety. And as you know, when parents, of course, will be extremely relieved once this program rolls out and their children start getting vaccinated. So I think overall, it's a good news. It is a great accomplishment for an Indian company to be able to carry out a large trial, which the results have been very encouraging without any side effects, serious side effects. So I think we are on the right track, and hopefully it will get the approval soon, and we will be able to roll it out.
All right, Dr. Dalwai, very, very quickly, sir. We had seen about 10 months ago in January this year, there was, you know, a controversy about the way in which permissions were given. There were all sorts of questions that were asked by different interested parties. Now that we've seen Covaxin actually rolled out, it's been administered for the past 10 months. Do you see any scope for a similar controversy at all when it comes to the vaccine for children?
No, I think all these controversies perhaps have been a result of the anxiety to make sure that about the safety and the efficacy both. And 10 months back we were still in the middle of a very big wave coming up then. Today things are a little less anxious. At the same time, as what Dr. Trehan sir said so correctly, I'm sure we need to understand the fact that children don't need a vaccine to be made mandatory to open schools. So we don't need to connect the two parts. Of course, there's no doubt about it that there'll be a far greater safety net around all of us once all the children get vaccinated. However, as we discussed earlier, there is the issue about how fast we can get the vaccines across to all the children. So I just want to clarify that let us not connect reopening of schools to inoculating the children. They are both two separate aspects. Let the schools begin. As long as children maintain COVID-appropriate behavior, I think we should start with the schools as well. And as soon as we can vaccinate all of them, let's start with the vaccination.
All right, let's start the vaccination as soon as we can. Dr. Dalwai, Dr. Naresh Trehan, as well as Dr. Vipul Shah. I'd like to thank all three of you for joining us and sharing with us very candidly your insights on this big development as far as the fight against COVID-19 is concerned. For the moment, we're going to slip into a quick break. I'd like to thank you for joining us on Newshour this evening.